Well, hello, hello, hello. How's everyone doing today? I'm turning that down a little bit. It is a little bit loud. Anyway, you there, Sprinkle Donut? Hello? You coming in? Hello?
I'm here. I'm here. I have my mic off.
Yeah, okay. Yes,
Ugh.
it's kind of weird, and I didn't know this at first, but with StreamYard, as soon as you click into that studio, it starts recording everything we say. So even before we go live, there's parts that we're talking about. It's actually
Yeah,
putting on there. I'm like, no,
yeah.
we might
I
say
have my
something.
yeah. I have my mic off. So happy Sunday.
Yes, happy Sunday. Happy Sunday. Now, are you off tomorrow? It's Sunday and Monday,
I
right?
am. Yeah,
Good,
I'm
good.
off tomorrow. Yeah.
Because we're going to start we're going to do Lindsay Clancy Day 5, and it's going to start at 8 a.m. my time because it'll be 9 a.m. their time. And I expect a lot of testimony tomorrow.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because where they left off was kind of a weird spot. Now, I do wonder why in the world are they being so protective over that 911 call? Now, I noticed that he was not in the courtroom when they played this 911 call. I know that she got extremely upset and they said that the jurors were crying, but it's a 911 call. When she appeals her case after she gets found guilty, we're going to hear it anyway. We'll see it anyway
Yeah.
because it will be part of the
Yeah.
damn appeal. It's kind of weird to me that they're keeping this so quiet. I don't understand it. But anyway, yeah. So just wanted to talk about that for a second. Now, today we're going to talk about a really strange case, and you think it's impossible to happen. But guess what? It is not impossible to happen. You can't fool the Innocence Project. I know you're thinking, what? Those are all fabulous attorneys. They're very smart people. They are super intelligent. They have been highly trained. What do you mean you can fool the Innocence Project? There's a man in Texas. His name was Edward Graff. He absolutely fooled the Innocence Project. Claimed for almost 30 years he was innocent. He didn't do anything. What happened to those kids was just an accident that they set the fire themselves. But there's a little law in Texas that people don't really think about or know about actually because it's not used very often. And it only affects people that were arrested between one period to another period. I've got to look the dates up exactly as we talk. But
Yeah.
if you were, I'm sorry,
71 through 78 or something. It's a real
yeah,
short amount of time.
it's a short amount. If you were prosecuted and found guilty and given life in prison during that time, if you have served at least 30 years, it's called the mandatory release law. So this guy talks the Innocence Project into taking his case. Then he comes back and they have a second trial. They get him a new trial. And then the shit starts to happen. But let me go ahead and read my fair use so we can get our show on the road because I always want to make sure we don't forget to use that. So this live stream contains commentary, analysis, opinion, and educational discussions protected under fair use. All footage, images, and materials shown are referenced or used for reporting, criticism, research, and public interest documentation. All individuals discussed are presumed innocent unless proven guilty in a court of law. Any allegations mentioned are based on publicly available information, filings, or statements from involved parties. This channel does not assert guilt, innocence, or wrongdoing beyond what has been legally established. There you go. So it has been legally established in this case that this guy used the Innocence Project and got away with murder. Basically, this is what happened.
Yeah,
So,
and the reason for that law is just a joke to create overcrowding in the prisons. I mean, that's just
mhm.
stupid. Stupid.
How in the world is a murderer causing overcrowding in the prison?
Exactly.
That makes no sense at all. Now, the kicker to this is this man has been released from prison, and basically, he walked out of that courtroom at his retrial, basically a free man. He lives in
After he
Kerrville,
had
Texas.
after he admitted to the crime.
Okay, but you're moving ahead. Stop. You're moving ahead. So, yeah, so now he lives in Kerrville, Texas. So let's get back over here where we were, and we're going to get started talking about this. So, yes, we know that he was accused of killing two children, Jason and Joby. Now, Jason was 8 years old, and Joby was 9 years old. Now, and this is in 1986, by allegedly locking them in a shed and setting it on fire. Now, his 19, hang on, let me let the dogs out of here. His 1988 conviction, he always maintained he was innocent. He was innocent, but he's not innocent. But he said he was innocent. But the funny thing is, and it's not funny at all, but his ex-wife never really believed him. She started noticing some weird things going on with him before. So the children actually became afraid of him before this actually happened. She couldn't quite figure out what was going on. Now, one of the things that he did was, okay, they went school clothes shopping. He bought the clothes, but he told the children, just leave the tags on. We're going to put them in the closet till later, right? When he went to the grocery store, he did not buy their favorite cereals and things. He did not buy what they normally eat. See, she didn't notice these little things until after the fact because she was at work the day this happened. Now, the thing about Edward Graff is he was a very well-known person in their town that they lived in, and I believe it was over in Hewitt, Texas, and he was a baker in that town, very well respected, okay? But one of the things nobody else noticed, later determined was flawed. Now, this triggered a full review by the Innocence Project of Texas and the Texas Fire Marshal's Office, which was part of a statewide effort to re-examine questionable arson convictions. So, the Innocence Project gets involved, the Arson Review Initiative happens, and Graff's case was one of the earliest reviewed under Texas fire science reform efforts. Now, the Texas Court of Appeals in 2013, the court overturned his conviction after determining that the arson testimony violated his due process. So then he gets a retrial announcement. It's going to happen in 2014. Now, modern fire experts testified that the fire showed no evidence of arson, contradicting the original 1988 findings. But there's a twist to all of this. He's always maintained he was innocent. He was innocent. He was innocent. All right. Now there's been many shows about this, which is kind of interesting. There's a show called The Innocence Files on Netflix. There's a show called Innocence Project 25-year anniversary on some station. I don't know where it's at, but there is a show. There's another show called The Innocence Project Executive Director's Message. And then there's Wrongful Convictions and False Confessions Seminar that this case is kind of used in. But here's the thing they don't tell you is the fact that they were fooled. They leave that little part out because nobody wants to admit that the Innocence Project helped a murderer walk free, because that's what they did. That is the exact truth. It is exactly what happened in this case. And it doesn't make any sense, does it? You got to ask yourself, how could the Innocence Project be fooled? It makes, no way, no way. So let me pull up this. I'm going to pull this up right here. And we're going to take a look at it right quick. Let me share my screen for everybody.
That was 1977 to 1987 as well.
So make sure you can see everything that I see. There you go. All right, we're on the right one. So Texas stepfather who burnt 2 kids to death, hang on, go away, spent decades claiming he was innocent. His final decision left the courtroom reeling, and it absolutely did. In 1986, Texas man Ed Graff was accused of killing his 2 young stepsons, Jason and Joby, by setting fire to the backyard shed while the boys were trapped inside. Now, initially, the blaze was treated as an accident, but a later investigation led prosecutors to charge Graff with capital murder. Now, prosecutors alleged that he had a financial motive, noting that the family had recently taken out life insurance policies on an 8 and a 9-year-old. And in the first trial, a jury ultimately convicted him and sentenced him to life in prison, sparing him death penalties. Now, Graff had served more than 2 decades in prison when the Innocence Project partnered with the state of Texas to review old arson cases considering advances in fire. Now, more than 25 years after this fire, his case was reopened after experts determined that the original photographic evidence and the fire investigations were insufficient to support a murder trial verdict. Eventually, the lack of scientific evidence suggested he was not guilty. Now, Claire Bradburn thought her ex-husband would pay for his crime and spend the rest of his life in prison. But the reopened case took an unexpected turn. After years of maintaining that he had not intentionally, he had not intentionally started this fire. Ralph ultimately pled guilty to the murders as part of a plea agreement. Now, let me, when he did this plea agreement, they were in active trial. He was already being tried the second time around. Now, he and his attorney knew that he was probably going to be found guilty once again. So they came up with this little known law that his attorney said, hey, listen, if we do this, yeah, you're guilty, but you walk out. Okay. Now, this really affected this mom, and it should have affected her. I could not imagine being in her shoes, knowing the man that killed her children for money walked out of that courtroom a free man when he was fixing to be found guilty once more. That's got to be hard to live with. Absolutely. Now, this plea allowed him to benefit from Texas's mandatory supervision laws. The years he served in prison were accredited to his sentence, and he was eligible for mandatory release. Now, the law originally designed to help reduce prison overcrowding for certain offenders sentenced between 1977 and 1987 ultimately resulted in Graff's release. Now, prosecutors had alleged that Graff drugged the boys before carrying them to the shed and setting it ablaze using an accelerant. However, when the case was re-examined decades later, experts in the case concluded that the original arson investigation relied on outdated methods. However, when the case was reopened, the new fire investigator testified in court that the fire's cause was undetermined, unable to establish how the fire was started. With the new conclusions in this case, where Graff could have been proven innocent, he chose to admit to the murders in court to walk free. His own son in court. Okay, so let me back up a minute. So he marries the mother of Joby, and he marries the mother of little boys, and they have a baby together. So this new baby was born before he set this building on fire. So with the new conclusions in this case, where Graff could have been proven innocent, he chose to admit to the murders in court and walk free. Ultimately, his own son in court said to him, you are not a father. You are not a man. May God have mercy on your soul, because no one on this earth should. The grieving mother, who also addressed Graff, if there's one thing I could say to Ed, it is this: his true judgment has not come, that he will be judged one day again for his deeds. And she expressed regret over marrying him and bringing her son into a blended family with him. Now, Ed Graff's trials drew national attention and due to the conflicting evidence that could not prove his involvement. Now, True Crime News shared this devastating tale on YouTube, where the video has gained, and it gained a lot of views. It did. Lots of comments. Many were expressed outrage over the outcome, with one writing he deserved the death penalty for killing those kids. One viewer posted, absolutely disgusting. Of course, he did know what he was doing. Another one asked, how do you get a job when you're convicted of a double murder? One more posted, the senseless and horrific murders of these two brothers are the ones that have stuck with me, and I hate monsters like this. Now, that's just one story about this case. There are many, many stories about this case, and there should be. What am I hearing? Okay, anyway, and there should be. Everybody should be outraged about this case. But the people that I don't understand is the Innocence Project. We have always known the Innocence Project to be so picky about the cases that they would accept. Like, they don't accept just any case. It has to meet certain criteria in order for the Innocence Project to get involved. How could they be fooled by this man? That's what I want to know. So now I'm going to go over here. We're going to pull up the Innocence Project and look at what they stand for. Because you're going to say, wait a minute, how in the world did he meet their rigid standards? So let me get this over here. They only take a few cases a year because it costs a lot of money for them to try these cases, to go back and get all the evidence and do all the things that they do. So when the Innocence Project gets involved, that's why they're so picky. Hang on, Innocence Project, Texas. Okay. So pull this up over here. Because they represent the victim, the defendant, for free. So they're over here representing this guy for free, believing what he's telling them. And then he comes right out and says, guess what? I did it. When he realizes he can walk free, I did it. But anyway, let me share my screen so we can look at the Innocence Project. Then we're going to go back, and this is not going to be a very long live today because it is Sunday, and we are going to be coming back at 8 o'clock in the morning to start back on the Lindsay Clancy trial, which is becoming very interesting. And, you know, I had my thoughts about it, but now I'm having some different thoughts about it. I just don't know. There's so many things happening in that trial all at the same time. It makes it difficult to really form any kind of decision right now because I want to call her a monster. I do. But can I? I don't know, you know. So anyway, let's talk about the Innocence Project. So there's an estimated 3,000 to 9,000 Texans serving sentences due to wrongful convictions. Wrongful convictions are more common than you think. Now, wrongful convictions devastate lives and families all over Texas, and fighting a wrongful conviction can be nearly impossible. The Innocence Project of Texas provides free, first-class investigative and legal services to people incarcerated for crimes they did not commit. Now, the Innocence Project of Texas exists to free those wrongfully convicted, reform policies that imprison the innocent, and educate the public to drive a lasting change. Really? Because you allowed a murderer to walk free is what you have done. How could you mess up? Let's look at all their stories and see if they even talk about this one story. Let's go. We're going to go down here and see if it's even brought up. Let's see. We have Joe David, Butch Martin, James Reyes. Let's see. Let's see all the ones that they've gotten out. Let's see if this guy's even mentioned, because I bet you he is not mentioned. Nope. Look, these are the people that they've gotten out. Look whose name is not part. Edward Graff is not part of the people that they talk about getting released. I wonder why. Yeah, think about that for a second. But you got to ask yourself, if Ed Graff got away with murder, how many other people have they represented that got away with murder as well? Can we believe everything we see happening on the Innocence Project? Because I don't think we can. Not after this. Not after this. In the years since the founding of Innocence Projects of Texas in 2006, we've contributed to the release and exoneration of 42 wrongfully convicted Texans. The path to exoneration is long and expensive, an average cost of $235,000, with the average exoneree spending 14 years in prison. They receive over 1,000 letters a year from Texans in need of their help. Okay? And Edward Graff was one of them that wrote to them about his wrongful conviction. I mean, I can understand sort of how this can happen, but not really. Not really. Let me see if we can look at something else over here. They've had 42 people freed and 615 years lost and counting. They actually count how many years these people actually spent in prison. Now, I don't know what every one of these people here did. I don't want to know what every one of these people here did, because the person I'm talking about is Edward Graff. And I want to know why they're not talking about Edward Graff. That's a question, isn't it? Why are they not talking about Edward Graff? Because they need to be. They are the reason he is walking free. Is there junk science? Is there junk science? Yes, we've talked about junk science many times. We have. But just because you find junk science in a case does not mean the person that is being accused is innocent. It just does not work that way. So just because one part of the investigation was not exactly what people think it should be, that does not mean a person's innocent. Now I'm going to go back over here to YouTube, and we're going to pull up just a little bit about this guy, and then we'll talk for a minute. It just shocked me when I saw this. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. How the hell could this happen? You just can't imagine that this could actually happen, but it can. And it's sickening. And if it happened in Texas, where else has it happened? Think about that for a second. So let me pull up Edward Graff. Hang on. And the woman, when I watched this and I listened to her speak, I was like, oh my God, this poor woman. She was devastated when this guy got out. Now, this is going to be from Life Story Net Films right here. We're going to watch this for a second. Hang on. We're going to first learn about him, and then we're going to go back and learn about what he freaking did and how this happened. Okay? So let me give full credit to Jack. Go sit down. Life Story Films. Hang on, guys. You know, we got to share the screen and do all that stuff. So Okay, credit. Get down. Life Story Films. All right. I believe that's how it's spelled. Let me make sure I've got it right. Life Story Films. Full credit to Life Story Films. Make sure that's right over here. It is. Now, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to watch this for a second under fair use. So here we go. Okay. Just learn about Mr. Edward Graff a little bit. Because listen, the one thing we know about people like him, he's a sociopath. I'm going to be real honest with you. He's a sociopath. Here we go. Right name there. Wait a minute, guys. Hang on a minute. Wait. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Is this the? There are two Edward Graffs. I forgot about that. No, this is the wrong Edward Graff. Let me go back to the right one. So sorry, guys. I need to find the right one. Here we go. Ed Graff. This guy right here. So sorry.
Two young boys burned to death in their own backyard shed. But the tragedy soon looked just like murder, and all fingers seemed to point to.
Okay, let me give the credit to True Crime Watch. I was like, wait a minute, that looks like a funeral thing. It was the funeral thing, the wrong Ed Graff. I'm sorry about that. Okay, Crime Network, I believe is the name of this. I'm going to use this under fair use. I'm like, good Lord, that doesn't even sound right. Golly. Oh my God, you got to laugh, don't you? You just got to laugh. Okay, here we go. Okay, there we go. Let me make this big and we'll get going on this. Sorry about that, guys. All right, here you go.
Their stepfather, Ed Graff Jr.
I felt he was responsible for murdering Joby and Jason.
But what kind of monster would kill his own sons? Cops and prosecutors believed Ed Graff was monster enough.
The eeriest thing about all of it was at the address where it happened, 505 Angel Fire.
10 months after the fire, Ed Graff Jr. was arrested and indicted.
Now, you know we have to stop every once in a while for fair use, so we're going to stop for just a minute and talk about it. Now, that is weird. The name of the street was Angel Fire, and sure enough, those angels died in that fire that he set. He set that fire. Those babies had no smoke in their lungs. It was as if they were asleep already, or deceased already before he even put them in the building to set it on fire. What did he do to those children? Here we go.
For the capital murders of 9-year-old Joby and 8-year-old Jason. If Ed was found guilty, he could face the death penalty. At trial, the prosecution alleged that Ed Graff somehow knocked out the boys, carried them to the shed, then set it on fire. And they believed they had fire science on their side.
There was enough evidence to see where the burn marks were, the floors. That was an accelerant. The doors were closed to the shed. My feeling was it was not accidental.
One of the firemen, he took a picture of the debris. So we had fabulous photographs to work with.
Former McLennan County District Attorney Vic Feazell brought in 2 nationally renowned fire science experts to review the photos and testify. Those experts believe the door to the shed was closed. 2 fires were intentionally set, an accelerant was used, and the boys were found on their backs in relaxed positions, which indicated they were unconscious. They apparently never attempted to protect themselves or get out. Their conclusion: it was a clear-cut case of arson. But
now, when you see that right there, you know there is no way that those children went in there and accidentally set that on fire. No possible way. That was proved. So I want to know exactly what junk science they're freaking talking about. This case clearly shows what happened. And I don't understand the Innocence Project taking this case. Here we go, guys.
Adding more heat to the case were other circumstantial pieces pointing at Graff's involvement.
There were some things that Ed did that didn't seem weird at the time, but then later became odd to me.
There was the boy's cereal and medications he didn't buy.
He's always so organized and everything's so methodical. The refilling of certain things, our food, the prescriptions.
And the new school clothes he didn't let the boys wear.
He didn't want to shop for school clothes. Then we did go, but he didn't want them to take the tags off. And he wanted to place the whole sack in our closet, and that was odd.
Days after the fire, Ed returned the clothes and got his money back. And
All
then
right. Did you hear that? Just days after the fire, he took those clothes back and got his money back. You don't think this was premeditated? Because I absolutely do think it was premeditated. There is no other reason why he would not fill the prescriptions and he would not buy their groceries for school, their cereals, those kind of things. And there's no other reason to keep the tags on the clothes that you bought them for school. That makes no sense other than what the hell are you thinking? Here we go, guys. It's sad.
there were the insurance policies Ed took out on the boys.
We heard allegations that Ed had embezzled money from the bank he had worked from before. And that then became what I felt was the motive for getting the insurance policies on these little boys.
As soon as the insurance policies were effective, within days is when he committed the murders.
Ed continued to proclaim his innocence and reportedly had answers for everything. He said the insurance policies were a way to save money for the boys' college. He kept the tags on in case the clothes didn't fit. Ed's defense? The boys accidentally set the shed on fire.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. How did the boys accidentally set the shed on fire when they were not even awake when this happened? We don't know if they were even alive. They made no attempt to get out of the shed. How in the world did they set it on fire? Hey, couponing. First thing came to my mind when he kept the tags on them in the bag in the closet. Yeah, that's exactly right, couponing. So good to see you, girl. You know I love seeing you come in here. But yeah, the case is just so clear-cut what happened. So the Innocence Project needs to explain to all of us, how the hell did they get themselves involved with this monster? Why in the world would they take this case and let a monster loose? No, I mean, what were they going to try to say? Oh, somebody else put the boys in there. Somebody else was there that day and somebody else set the fire. Mom was at work, so there was no way mom did it. We'll keep going, guys. It's really sad, and I'm sorry, trigger warning.
And there were a lot of people who believed in Ed's innocence.
I think he has a winning personality.
Well, he's a biker.
Because
Yeah.
he had at least 20 character witnesses come testify on his behalf. I think Ed is a sociopath.
When I was testifying, Ed did look at me and stared,
Look at
just
her.
kind of stared at me. It was his intimidation. I had
Yes.
no problem looking at him, looking right back at him.
As the case went to the jury, no one felt 100% confident.
Did you ever feel this was a slam dunk case against Ed Graff?
Oh, heck no. No, it was not a slam dunk case. It was it was a circumstantial case. Almost no case is slam dunk. Look at OJ.
Yeah, that's right. Look at O.J. Simpson. That's a perfect example of that. But because the prosecutor over here is telling us, well, hell no, it wasn't a slam dunk. I had no idea. He didn't know he was going to win the case or not win the case because, again, there was absolutely nothing but circumstantial evidence. This will tell you just how strong circumstantial evidence can be. And they too went back and looked at many different cases where arson science had been used before and decided that this was one of those cases that they could prove was junk science. But I don't, you will never convince me, never, that the science they used wasn't accurate. Never. Here we go.
Simpson, he should have been convicted. And they let
Sure
him
should have.
go.
After hearing 3 weeks of testimony and spending only 4 hours deliberating, the jury came back with a verdict.
When the jury said the guilty verdict, it was just a relief. It was some peace.
Guilty. Ed was convicted of capital murder. The sentence, life in prison. He narrowly escaped death, unlike Joby and Jason. And that's where the story would normally end. Not this one.
Graff's case is being re-examined, and so are others in which defendants were sent to prison for setting fires based on expert testimony about burn patterns or charring that is now considered suspect.
22 years after Ed Graff went to prison, the Innocence Project partnered with the Texas State Fire Marshal's Office to conduct a review of previous arson convictions Ed Graff's case was one of the cases the Innocence Project believed warranted attention.
If the original investigators had looked at the photographs objectively and seen, they would have seen that there was not any forensic evidence there to support their conclusions.
2
Wait a
years
minute.
later,
Okay, wait a minute, though. We are going to look at the appeal. We're going to look at the appeal in just a minute. But, you know, here's the thing about this. You've got kids that have no smoke in their lungs, and you're going to tell me there's nothing to say that somebody else set that fire? Really? I don't believe you. Here we go.
the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals said the scientific testimony used to find Ed Graff guilty of arson has been proved false.
I was at some of the hearings. It was
I feel
just
bad for
sort
her.
of like opening the wounds again.
Claire's heart nearly stopped. After 25 years behind bars, Ed Graff was granted a new trial.
All I can tell them is that, I didn't do it.
Coming up for Claire.
Did you hear me say, all I can tell him is I didn't do it. But you went to your second trial. Okay, so here's a little thing about trials that most people don't realize. You can take a plea all the way up until they actually until they say, okay, defense rest, and they send it off to the jury to go deliberate. You have to give your plea prior to them saying defense rest. It's too late after they say defense rest. So his attorney knew this, and he knew as time went on and this trial was looking kind of bad, what was going to happen here. He already knew the jury was going to call him guilty again. So before he rested his case, he presented this plea deal under the mandatory release law in the state of Texas. That law should have never been on the books. It's kind of like, to me, it's kind of like Florida's allowing people to sit on death row 35, 45, 50 years. That shit should never happen, period. Never. It's kind of the same thing. But we'll listen to this, and then we're going to go back and look at his appeal.
Justice for Joby and Jason had become a never-ending fight.
There was a hush over the room. We knew, knowing Ed, we knew there was a plan.
Well, I would say I won my freedom more than anything.
Of course you did.
And coming up for Claire, the
Sociopath.
nightmare wouldn't die, and neither would Ed Graff's chance at freedom.
All right. That is the end of that one. So I'm going to get rid of that, and we're going to pull up his appeal. It's right here. So let me share my screen so we can look at this appeal together, because in these appeals, you learn all kinds of things that you didn't know because we don't have the benefit of seeing his trial on film. All we can do is go through the appeal and read what happened and what the facts were because it's in the appeal. So we're going to start over here. Make sure you see what I see. And we're going to take a look at this. All right, here we go. So this goes back to August 26th of 1986. The appellant's two adopted sons. He actually adopted these little boys, Jason and Joby. They died in a fire in a storage shed behind their residence. Now, the appellant was convicted of the capital murder of Jason, but received a life sentence rather than the death penalty for Joby. Now, Texas Penal Code 1903, in Vernon's book 1989, his conviction rests entirely on circumstantial evidence. The principal complaint is that the evidence was insufficient to support his conviction, and the judgment will be affirmed. Okay. Now, evidence is sufficient to support a conviction when, viewing it in the light most favorable to the verdict, any rational trier of the fact could have found that the essential elements of the crime beyond reasonable doubt. And then they cite a bunch of different state, cases, etc. I'm not going to read all those because it would take so much longer. Now, this is the standard of review for either direct or circumstantial evidence. However, circumstantial evidence must exclude every reasonable hypothesis except that of the defendant's guilt. Now, this conning piece of shit is sitting there trying to look so pitiful in front of those people claiming he's innocent. To know that he actually did this, that had to just, I don't know how the mother of those babies can even walk around every day knowing that he claimed he was innocent all those years, but he really did do it. And he took advantage of the most ridiculous law on the books in the state of Texas. And I don't even think she could sue the state of Texas over it. There was really nothing she could do because that was the law at the time, which is sad. Okay. Okay. So we're going to come on down. I'm going to read some more. Let me see. Okay, so it's eliminating all reasonable hypotheses other than the defendant's guilt is not a different test for sufficiency, but is merely an analytical tool used to facilitate the standard of review. And Butler, blah, blah. All the evidence must be considered in determining whether the state has met its burden of proving each element of the offense beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, the appellate first contends under point 1 that the circumstantial evidence did not exclude the reasonable hypothesis that the children started the fire accidentally. Bullshit. They just told us that the children were not even conscious when this fire started. They did not have smoke in their lungs and all this other stuff. The children could not have started the fire. They made no attempt to get out of that shed. There's no way the children could have started the fire. This is the most, oh my God. Anyway, here we go. Ooh, let me get back over here and start reading again. I'm sorry, guys. It just really bothered. This one just gripes my ass so bad that he was allowed to leave prison and he's a damn murderer. Okay, let me get back to where I was. I'm sorry. All the evidence must be considered to determine whether the state has met its burden. Okay, blah, blah. Appellate first contends under point 1 that circumstantial evidence did not exclude the reasonable hypothesis that the children started the fire accidentally. Thus, he argues that the evidence was insufficient to support his conviction because no rational trier of fact could have found beyond a reasonable doubt that a crime was committed. Well, I don't know, sir. We have 2 children who are deceased in a burned up building who made no attempt to leave that building and was not conscious when they died in the fire. You tell me that no crime was committed. And corpus delicti, 2 elements in the murder prosecution. The body of the deceased must be found and identified, and 2, the death of the deceased must be shown to have been caused by a criminal act of another. Circumstantial evidence can be used to establish either element. Undisputed evidence establishes that the bodies found in the debris were those of Jason and Joby. However, appellant attacks the sufficiency of the circumstantial evidence to prove the second element, i.e., that a criminal act occurred. All right. Shortly before 5 p.m. on August the 26th of 1986, Tom Lucenay, the deputy chief of Hewitt Volunteer Fire Department, noticed light-colored smoke which appeared to be from a grass fire near his home. He ran into his house to get his fire department walkie-talkie to report the fire. By the time he returned to his front door, the smoke had changed color to a dark black, and there were bright orange flames. Now, Lucenay used his walkie-talkie to report the structure fire in his neighborhood. Now, running from his home towards the fire, he heard a couple of small explosion sounds. I'm pretty sure there was gas in that building because that's where people kept their lawnmowers, etc. Now, when Lucenay arrived at the scene of the fire, he saw a storage shed engulfed in flames in the backyard of the appellant's residence. He described the fire, which had flames 12 to 14 feet high, as burning fast and very hot. Other firemen gave similar descriptions of this fire. Now, Lucenay at first was unable to get into the backyard because the gate of the privacy fence was chain locked. One of the appellant's neighbors found the other entry in the backyard tied shut with a rope. Now, while Lucenay and the neighbor were attempting to pull open up a fence post to gain entry, a parent who was holding an infant appeared and helped them by kicking through some of the slats in the privacy fence and pulling down the gate post. Firemen first learned that the appellant's 2 sons were missing when the fire was at a smoldering stage. They were preparing to search the neighborhood for the boys when the bodies of the children were discovered in the shed debris. A fireman took photographs of this scene, which were later examined by 2 arson investigators. Now, Joby's body was found near the shed's 2 front doors, while Jason's body was lying in the rear corner of the shed. Both bodies were laying face up and looked relaxed, and neither child appeared to have been trying to protect or shield his facial area from the heat. After the fire was extinguished, Lucenay expressed his condolences to the appellant and his wife, and out of a sense of compassion, offered to remove the burnt debris from the backyard. At first, the appellant was undecided, but several minutes later, he told Lucenay to remove everything burned, and after police and fire officials gave their approval, Lucenay and several firemen returned later that night and used a front-end loader and a dump truck to remove what was left of that shed. Now, let me point something out to you guys, okay? They are out there removing all of this the same day this happened. I will say this, that would not be happening in today's arsons. They don't just remove the debris because it needs to be investigated fully, and you have not had time to actually do every step they do in arson investigations today on the same day. So that would not have happened today. That is true. That was awful fast. After the shed was removed and Lucy returned home, he recognized that he had made a mistake in removing the debris before a complete investigation was made to determine the cause of the fire and the manner of the children's death. And what disturbed Lucy most was the suddenly remembered seeing a gas can sitting on Appellant's backyard patio and recognized that quick hot fire and had characteristics associated with the use of an accelerant. 3 other people also noticed this gas can sitting on the patio while they were at the scene. Okay, now think about this for a second, guys. Think about it. Here we are, the gas cans on the patio, and the firemen who live down the street, it's like, oh my God, they're going to have to be looking at this structure over there where these children died. And so he offers to remove it for them. And he realizes after that, oh my God, I've just messed up. I messed up the scene. He did mess up the crime scene right there. They would not be happening today, and they would not let him do that today. And he really shouldn't have done it then. But see, it doesn't matter that he removed it because these are trained firemen. They know what an accelerant looks like. They know what a burn pattern looks like. And they know what it looks like when somebody is attempting to get out of a fire. And that's not what happened here. All right, let's go back over here and we'll just keep reading this. I'm sorry, trigger warning. I know it's bad, guys. I know it's bad. A pathologist who performed the autopsies at the funeral home conducted that both boys died as a result of asphyxia due to smoke inhalation and severe burns. He found no evidence of any other trauma. A drug scan was negative except for a non-prescription antihistamine in Jason's blood. However, the high level of carbon monoxide in their blood and the amount of soot found in their throat and lungs, I guess they did inhale something. So they must have been breathing. They were unconscious, but breathing. All right, good to know. In his blood. However, the high level of carbon monoxide in their blood and the amount of soot found in their throat and lungs indicated that both children were alive when the fire started and that their deaths were not instantaneous. Now, these findings were confirmed by a second autopsy in Dallas after the bodies were exhumed. Now, the pathologist who performed and supervised the second autopsies found no evidence that the boys had been tied up, but acknowledged the intense heat can destroy evidence and that poisonous gases emitted from the fires can quickly render a person unconscious. Joseph Porter, an arson investigator from Texas Fire Marshal's office, began his investigation 8 days after the fire. 8 days. That's way too long. He viewed the burned debris at a gravel pit where he had, okay, see, they should have never dumped this at a gravel pit. That's also messed up this case. And it might be part of the reason why this piece of shit walked free. Okay. Where he reviewed reports of the first autopsies, had the bodies exhumed for a second autopsy, and attended the second autopsy, and gathered information from witnesses. Porter also obtained a photograph of the shed before its destruction from the appellant. Now, by examining the burn patterns and pour patterns shown in the photographs taken at the scene, Porter determined that the fire originated in the front left corner of the shed and that some type of accelerant was used to enhance this fire. Although burn patterns indicate that a plastic can containing gasoline was located inside this shed near the left front door, he said that gasoline from the gas can or spillage from 2 lawnmowers or a weed eater found the debris could not account for that amount of accelerant used or the distinctive pour patterns found on the shed's plywood floor and floor joists. Moreover, the burn patterns on the hinges and the shed's double doors indicated that they were closed during the fire. Let me ask you a question. Okay, guys, hang on. Let's go back over here. Does anybody believe that those kids walked into that shed, closed the doors behind them, started messing around with something, and caught the damn shed on fire? Does that make any sense to you? No, it doesn't. Because even at 8 or 9 years old, you're not going to walk into a dark shed and shut the doors. You got to have light coming in, right? I just don't believe they did this to themselves. Well, we already know he did it because he admitted it. Hey, Leslie, so good to see you. Isn't this a horrific story, girl? It is terrible. I'm just so sick that this man's over here living in Kerrville, living his life for Riley. After taking the lives of these 2 children. Yeah, it's disgusting. Oh, boy. Porter said that the positions of these bodies made the fire suspicious because it's almost unheard of to find two bodies face up if both victims were awake and alert at the time of the fire. He explained that the fire victims, if they are conscious and alert when the fire is burning, are usually found in a position trying to protect their face from the intense heat and smoke. Now, unburned portions of their buttocks indicated that the boys were both lying on their backs through the fire. They never got up. The fire is raging. They never stood up. They just laid there. Does that make any sense? No, ma'am, it does not. He said, okay. Now, Porter noted that the second autopsies, although revealing soot in their air passages, did not show any burns in the lungs. He said that the boys, who were at least 4 foot tall, would have suffered burned lungs if they had stood up and inhaled that 400-degree heat at any time during the free burning stage of that fire. The absence of any burning in their lungs indicated that neither child stood up at any time while this fire was burning. No, because they were unconscious at the time this fire was burning. Now, based on his investigation, because you have to see, because there is no way for them to know if they had blunt force trauma or anything like that. I mean, they were badly burned. So I don't know, and you also would not know if they were strangled because of the burn situation, right? So there's so many things that they were not able to test for that he could have done to these babies before he took them in there and laid them out and started the damn fire. Okay. Yeah, I'm getting upset about it. I sure am. Sorry. Now, based on his investigation, Porter believed that the fire was intentionally set and that the crime of arson was committed. Finding the double gates to the appellant's backyard tied shut with a rope and the single gate chain lock indicated arson. Porter started because an arsonist will try to make entry to the scene of the fire as difficult as possible. Now, Charles King, a New York arson investigator, examined the photographs that Porter had used to reach his conclusions. However, he used computer-enhanced enlargements of several of the photographs, which allowed him to see some minute details of burn and pour patterns in the debris. Now, basing his opinion on those photographs, King found that the fire was intentionally set, that an accelerant was used, and both front doors of the shed were closed during this fire. His most interesting discovery was that there were actually 2 separate fires inside that shed, approximately 9 feet apart, both intentionally set and enhanced by an accelerant. Now, Porter has suspected that there were 2 separate fires, but could not confirm his suspicion with the unenhanced photographs. Now, King's opinion was that there was no reasonable explanation for both bodies being found face up, and that the boys were unconscious or incapacitated before and all during this fire, which meant they could not have accidentally started it. Thank you. No, they could not have. Now, like Porter, he said that the simultaneous leakage of gasoline from the lawnmower or the weeder could not explain the amount of accelerant used or the distinctive pour patterns of the 2 wildly separate fires. Now, based on the burn and the pour patterns, King said that the accelerant must have been on the floor at least 30 minutes before it ignited to penetrate the shed's plywood floor and floor joists. He stated that all of this evidence indicated that the boys did not accidentally set this fire. Now, the 2 arson experts testified that the fire was deliberately set by means of an accelerant. Now, King's opinion was that the children could not have accidentally started the fire because they were unconscious both before and during the fire. Logically, if they were unconscious before the fire ignited, then they could not have started it accidentally. Now, some other person may have intentionally set the fire. When viewed in the light of the most favorable to the verdict, the cumulative force of the circumstantial evidence excluded the hypothesis that the children accidentally set the fire, and was sufficient for the jury to have found beyond a reasonable doubt that the fire resulted in a criminal act. Thus, the evidence was sufficient for the jury to have found that the second element of the corpus delicti beyond a reasonable doubt. Appellant also argues under point that the evidence was insufficient to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he was responsible for setting this fire. Although establishing appellant's criminal agency was not an element of corpus delicti, the state nevertheless had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he was responsible for the criminal act to obtain a conviction. His criminal responsibility could be established only circumstantially. Okay. A lot of crimes are illicit. A lot of crimes are proved only circumstantially. We know that. We've seen it over and over. But just because nobody saw you do it doesn't mean you're innocent. Okay? In fact, I'll tell you something else that happened with this guy. When somebody realized that he lived in Kerrville, Texas, they wanted to go interview him, and they went and found him. And he told them to get the hell out of his face. See, he's an arrogant piece of shit. Here we go. Any suspicion that someone other than the appellant started this fire was not reasonable under the circumstances proven because it was out of harmony with the evidence. First, after eliminating the hypothesis that the children were responsible for starting this fire, the circumstances prove that the appellant was the only other person present who could have said it. The fact alone would not support his conviction, but was circumstance that tend to establish his guilt when combined with other facts. Let me skip past these cases right here. Now, second, the appellant was the only person with a motive to kill the children, a fact which not only linked him to the crime, but excluded the hypothesis that someone else started this fire. Witnesses described his treatment of the boys as strict, cold, and without love or affection. Some of his actions at the scene of the fire were described as particularly inappropriate and unfeeling. His actions at the funeral home, where he not only suggested the two bodies, okay guys, hang on. Oh my God, trigger warning. Some of his actions at the scene of the fire were described as particularly inappropriate and unfeeling. His actions at the funeral home where he not only suggested that two bodies be buried in the same casket, apparently to save money, but tried to prevent the boy's portrait from being placed between their caskets at the funeral service, was evidence of his enmity toward his adopted sons. I want you to hear what I just said. Like they were puppies, putting both of them in the same casket to save money. What the god dang hell is wrong with him? This ought to piss you all off. I mean, everybody, this should piss you off to treat a child like this, an innocent child. God. All right. Despite the estranged relationships, the appellant purchased a separate $25,000 life insurance policy on Jason and Joby just 27 days before the fire, purportedly to provide for their college education. These policies, containing double indemnity provisions, arrived in the mail at appellant's home on the day of the fire. Now, the appellant, who was described as obsessed with money, thus stood to gain financially from the boys' accidental deaths. Appellant's wife, who was concerned about his harsh treatment of the boys, told him shortly before the fire that she was going to leave and take the children, including their baby, just as soon as school started. Appellant told others that his marital troubles stemmed from the presence of the two boys in the family unit and that his marriage would improve without them. In fact, he told his wife shortly after the fire that he hoped their deaths would bring them closer together. Thus, the appellant also could have been motivated by the belief that he could save his marriage by eliminating the two boys, the root cause of his marital troubles. All right. Did you hear what I just said? That the two boys caused him was the whole reason his marriage was going bad, and that she was going to leave him and take the new baby too. Doesn't this give you every bit of the state that he absolutely wanted those children gone, and he made sure they were gone? Absolutely. 27 days after purchasing this insurance, the day the policy arrives in the mail, he has set fire to that building and the babies are dead. Ooh, telling you. Third, there was evidence that the appellant knew that both boys had died in the fire before he was given that information. Now, after fireman Jim Sutter saw the body of a child in the debris, he entered the house and told the appellant, "We have found the body of a child." Emphasis added. Sutter then closed the drapes and blinds so that people inside the home could not see the grisly scene in the backyard. However, as the appellant's wife walked into their home, Sutter heard the appellant tell her, "Honey, we've lost both of the boys." Now listen to that. "Honey, we've lost both of the boys." But he had not been told both of the boys were found in the debris. How did he know that? Because he set the freaking fire. Okay. Ooh-wee, let me get myself together here. Sutter thought that this comment was odd because the appellant had not been told about the second body. Finally, the evidence indicated that the appellant made preparations consistent with an intention not only to kill the children, but to obliterate any vestiges of their memory. Witnesses described him as a list maker, organized, meticulous, and possessive, so possessive, in fact, that he would call friends and relatives looking for his wife if she were only a few minutes late coming home from work. Now, appellant's wife said that he even refused to allow her privacy in the bathroom. However, on the morning of the fire, appellant encouraged his wife, a teacher, not to rush home that day, but to remain at school and to prepare her room for the new school year. This was markedly inconsistent with his usual attitude toward her and her absences from home. Now, unlike prior years when appellant would suggest that the boys' school clothes and supplies be bought well in advance of the beginning of the school year, he just uncharacteristically resisted doing that in August of 1986, even though the new school year was about to begin. I mean, it was days away, guys, days away. When his wife nevertheless insisted on buying the boys their school clothes, appellant refused to allow the store tags to be removed from the clothing and required the clothes to be kept in their original bags. Now, shortly after their deaths, he returned the new clothes to the store and received a credit on his charge accounts. Now, appellant was so organized and such a list maker that he would purchase the boys' breakfast cereal and Jason's antihistamine medication well in advance of their depletion. However, he did not purchase either the cereal or the medicine just before their deaths, despite their depletion. Shortly after the fire, appellant also moved all his wife's memorabilia of the two boys, including their baby pictures, books, school papers, and other keepsakes, into the shed from a storage area in the carport. Almost all of these, wait a minute, let's reread this. Shortly before the fire, appellant had moved all his wife's memorabilia of the two boys, including their baby pictures, books, school papers, and other keepsakes, from the shed to a storage area in the carport. He deliberately set that fire. He saved what he knew she would want, and then he set that fire. Now, almost all of these items were destroyed in the fires. However, appellant did not move any of his personal keepsakes into the shed. Let's reread that because that makes no sense. He's saying that she removed them. Shortly before the fire, appellant also moved all his wife's memorabilia of the two boys, including their baby pictures, books, school papers, and other keepsakes. Oh, I'm sorry, into the shed from the storage area. Okay, so they were in the carport. He put it all in the shed. So when he set that shed on fire, he not only burned up the children, but every bit of their memory. Okay, now I got that straight. Almost all of these items were destroyed in the fire. However, appellant did not move any of his personal keepsakes into the shed. Think about that. Every memory, everything she had about these babies was taken from the carport area where she had it stored into that shed. So that when he burned those babies up, there was not one piece of memorabilia left of those children. Obliterated them from her life completely. And you're going to tell me that circumstantial evidence doesn't say he did something, right? That just doesn't happen by accident. Okay? Oh boy. Every fact did not have to point directly and independently to the appellant's guilt, as the combined and cumulative force of all the incriminating circumstances could establish his criminal agency. Evidence of his presence at the scene, when combined with the circumstances showing motive, preparation, and a gas can which could have contained the accelerant, and personal knowledge of both deaths, was sufficient to exclude the hypothesis that the fire was started by someone other than the appellant, and for the jury to have found beyond a reasonable doubt that he was criminally responsible for setting the fire that killed his adopted sons. Thus, the evidence was sufficient to support his conviction because the jury could have found all elements of the offense beyond a reasonable doubt. Point 1 is overruled. The court instructed the jury a person commits a capital murder when the person murders more than one person during the same criminal transaction. Point 2 is that the court erred when it overruled an objection that the charge did not define the term criminal transaction. Criminal transaction is not defined in the statutes. Generally, the court needs not define a term which has been statutorily defined. Okay. Let's talk about why that's kind of important. Criminal transaction. We're going to talk about that for a second. All right, because we have to. If that is part of the reason why they overturned his conviction by the words criminal transaction, oh my gosh, boy, that's just ridiculous. Okay. So a criminal transaction is a connected group of acts or conduct that establishes at least one criminal offense, often used in law to define a single criminal incident, evaluate multiple charges, or prosecute financial crimes like money laundering. This had nothing to do with money. It was not a single incident. There was 2 children who died. Okay. It was a criminal episode where multiple offenses tied together by a common plan or continuous action. Okay, there we go. Now, boy, okay. Our appellant argues that the term had to be defined because it's a term of art, which the legislator intended to have a specific and technical meaning. Just because a term has acquired technical meaning does not require its definition. Okay, and I know that's kind of a little bit, you're going, what? Now, the prurient interest, a term not statutorily defined, was not error, although it may have acquired a technical meaning. Instead, the term criminal transaction should be read into its context and construed accordingly. The court did not err when it refused to define the term. Oh, good. They were not using that against the court. Okay. However, assuming that the term should have been defined, appellant would be entitled to a reversal only by showing some harm from the error. As there was no evidence of more than one criminal transaction, the jury could have understood the term only to mean the fire in the shed. Considering the charge as a whole, in light of the complete record, any error resulting from the failure to define criminal transaction would not have contributed to beyond a reasonable doubt to the appellant's conviction or punishments. Okay, good. Now, the appellant complains at his final point that the court erred when it refused to instruct the jury on the defense's accident and voluntariness. He contends the jury should have been instructed to acquit him if there was reasonable doubt that the children accidentally started the fire or that he acted other than voluntarily. Accident is no longer a defense under the penal code, and the court did not err when it refused to charge it as such. An instruction on voluntariness now serves the same function as the former instruction on accident, and that's under Penal Code annotated 6.01A of the Vernon Supplementals of 1990. A person commits an offense only if he voluntarily engages in conduct. Thus, a jury should now be instructed to acquit if the evidence raises any reasonable doubt the defendant voluntarily engaged in that conduct as charged. However, the evidence raises the defense only if the defendant admits committing the act charged, and the defense will absolve him from criminal responsibility for engaging in the conduct. Sanders versus State, blah, blah. Now, voluntariness was not raised by the evidence because the appellant denied any act in connection with the fire. Accordingly, the court properly refused to submit a defensive instruction on voluntariness because it was not raised by the evidence. The state asserts in a cross point that the court abused its discretion when it failed to conduct an indigency hearing before providing appellant with a free statement of facts. What? The state asserts in cross point that the court abused its discretion when it failed to conduct an indigency hearing before he was not indigent, people. Okay, before providing appellant with a free statement of facts. Additionally, the state argues that the appellant was not indigent. No, he was not indigent, and this appeal was abated pending a hearing in the trial court of appellant's indigency. The court has since been furnished with a complete record of the evidentiary hearing, including findings of fact and conclusions of law, and will now consider this cross point as if no erroneous actions had occurred. At the evidentiary hearing, the parties stipulated that the appellant had filed the affidavit of indigency and that the facts recited therein were and remain true, and that there was indigent at the time of the appeal. Based on these stipulations and the record as a whole, the court did not abuse its discretion when it ordered that he provide statement of facts without cost. Okay, the cross point is overturned and the judgment is affirmed. So that was his appeal. That was his appeal, and his judgment was affirmed. Okay, so he lost his appeal. That's it. It's over. But then we get the Innocence Project over here involved, right? That's the next thing that happened, and this is when it got big. All right. So that was his appeal from 1990. I'll get my little thing to act up over here. But in March of 2013, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals overturned his conviction after determining that the arson testimony used on him was false and violated due process. Now let's pull that up. We looked at his first appeal. We're going to pull this up next. All right, let me get this over here. Let me share my screen. All right, I changed my screen over here. Let's share a screen right quick and we'll take a look at this. Arson files, Ed Graff wins. Okay? I don't want to do that. Texas highest criminal court on Wednesday overturned the arson conviction of Ed Graff, who served nearly 25 years of a life sentence for a crime he likely did not commit. In a two-page opinion, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals ruled that the arson evidence used to convict Graff of burning to death his two stepsons in a Waco suburb in August of 1986 was flawed. The false testimony violated Graff's due process rights. The judges wrote, but while they threw out the original convictions, the judges stopped short of declaring Graff actually innocent. That means he will be sent to the McLean County Jail in late April to await, for county prosecutors to decide if they will seek a new trial or set Graff free. Now, the McLennan County DA's office released a statement on Wednesday saying it's still examining the case. If prosecutors pursue a new trial, they will have to win a conviction without the use of much evidence of arson. 3 nationally known fire scientists have examined Graff's case and found no evidence of arson. How in the hell did they find no evidence of arson? This makes no sense at all. I don't understand. I just don't understand. Okay. Oh boy. The prosecutor's own expert who recently looked at the case also found, how can his own expert say he did not see indicators of arson? At a January hearing, fire scientist Doug Copper delivered devastating testimony that the fire toxicology evidence disapproved the prosecutor's theory of how the fire was set. Now, Graff was convicted of drugging his 8 and 9-year-old stepsons, dragging them into the shed behind the house in Hewitt, pouring gasoline on the floor, and locking the doors and setting the shed on fire. The forensic evidence in the scenario has fallen apart. The autopsies found no drugs in the boys' bodies. There was no evidence gasoline was poured on the floor, and arson experts say the door to the shed must have been open or the fire would have died from lack of oxygen. The other evidence that in the investigation once thought were indicators of arson have been disapproved in 2 decades since the fire. As Carpenter testified in January, the high levels of carbon monoxide in the boys' blood point to an accidental fire, not one intentionally set with gasoline. Oh my God. Now, the Observer wrote that the first in-depth investigation of the Graff case in May of 2009, part of a 4-part series on the Florida arson case, and it goes, read our original story on Graff here. I'm not going to read that right now, but we can come back to it. The Graff case is the first Texas arson conviction overturned since the controversy of the execution of Cameron Todd Willingham, who was put to death in 2004 on similarly flawed arson evidence. Now, Graff's case has also been examined by a panel of fire experts reviewing Texas arson case in partnership with Texas Innocence Project. The panel will meet in early April when it's expected to make a recommendation on the Graff case that may help sway prosecutors' decision on whether to launch a new trial. They can take as long as they want to make this decision. It could still take months or years to win his release. So while Wednesday's ruling was undoubtedly welcome news for Graff and the many other Texans still in prison on faulty arson convictions, his attorney remains cautious, and he says that was good news. Now, we know that that's not what happened here, so let me get off of here. And we're going to go back. Let me go back now, and I'm going to pull up his other trial, how he actually ended up walking out of that courtroom a free man. So hang on just a second, guys. So then, in 2013-2014, after the conviction was overturned, the McLennan County DA announced they would retry Graff. They said they still believe they could win a conviction without the old arson evidence. Bond was set at $1.5 million, and prosecutors insisted they still had circumstantial evidence. A state fire panel reviewing the old arson cases also found major flaws in the original investigation. In 2014, October, jury selection began for Gary's retrial. The retrial was based on modern fire science, which completely undermined the original evidence. Key points. Fire experts testified there was no proof of arson. The state fire marshal's office reclassified the fire as undetermined, but undetermined does not mean that you are not responsible for something. It just means it was undetermined, okay? Nearly all physical evidence from the 1988 had been debunked, and the retrial is where the shocking twist happens. So here we go. We're going to retry him. Here's what happens. Although not the appeal documents, this is the moment this is when you're going to freak out, folks. This right here is the problem. So they are going to retry him. Right as the jury was preparing to deliberate, which this is the rule, this is how it works, he decided to plead guilty to both murders. And this is the reason why. Because doing so allowed him to use the little-known Texas mandatory release, which credited his 27 years served and made him immediately eligible for release. So this is the moment where he had fooled the Texas Innocence Project. He used that to overturn his conviction to get a retrial and then confessed only when it benefited him. This is disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting that this was allowed to happen. The Innocence Project could not see exactly what was happening here. And I don't care that they said, oh, there was something wrong with the science, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. There were so many other things about this case that made it look like he did not want those children around. I'm surprised there was no CPS involvement, to be honest with you, because what we usually know, and I know you know this, but what we usually see is anytime a child goes missing or a child dies, and we have step parents involved, there's usually a CPS case involved. Is that not right, Sprinkle? Think about that. Right there.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if because he had legally adopted them, maybe there was something that they didn't step in, but it shouldn't matter if they're adopted or not. A death of a child, especially if there's another living child, you would think that CPS would have gotten involved because of the other baby.
Right. That's it's a great thing to talk about, right? Because he was convicted of arson, of killing those two children, right? Yeah. Leslie says, I'm disgusted. A murder walks free for a premeditated murder. It is wrong. It's completely wrong. Now, we don't have that law in Texas anymore. You can no longer use this mandatory release law. That's off the books. But I hope that the Innocence Project learned a huge lesson in that. Because notice the Texas Innocence Project, they don't talk about this case at all. It's not even shown on their website because it's an embarrassment to them that they allowed a murderer to walk free with this bullshit. And I hope everybody learns a lesson from this. I really do. I mean, they don't have to know whether you actually, stab the person or set the building or whatever it is. They don't have to know that you actually did it. They can have enough circumstantial evidence to put you in the time and the place that something happened. And how you treat this person or persons, how you react toward them is a big teller of what's going on in the household. It just is. I mean, I have one question though, really, and really, it is how many other times has this happened where we have this exact situation and nobody knows about it because it's never talked about, because nobody wants to admit they were fooled, right? So that's the question I have. What do y'all think?
Yeah, this is just an absolutely disgusting case.
Boy, let me look up something right quick. I'm going to see if there's any other cases out there that is known that this has happened in. Okay, hang on a second. Let me see if it'll pull it up. I mean, and I always wanted to support the Innocence Project. I always thought, okay, that's good because we know that there are innocent people sitting in prison. We know that, and we've seen it happen many, many times. But how many times have they actually been fooled? Okay, let's see. Historical tracts, client cases, death row releases. Okay. Yeah, there's nothing really. Let me see if there's any. I'm looking. Let's see if it says anything about impact through the Innocence Project. All right, let's do it like that. Okay, by the Graff case. I just wonder if that mother could have sued anybody, because I would have. Okay. The impact of the Ed Graff case on the Innocence Project, specifically the Innocence Project of Texas, was a profound institutional shift that decoupled the organization's mission from assuming a client's absolute factual innocence and focusing instead on the integrity of a forensic science. So they did learn a big lesson from this. Ed Graff Jr. was convicted in 1988 of murdering his two stepsons. We know that. The Innocence Project championed his case. successfully proven that his original conviction relied entirely on debunked junk arson science. However, during that retrial, he abruptly stops it all and he pleads guilty to it. You know that those, I wish that we had some footage from the courtroom when that took place, because you know every one of those attorneys sitting there with the Innocence Project is like, oh my God. And he probably turned around and looked at him and smiled like the biggest Joker smile you've ever seen. Okay. Okay, guys, I just wanted to talk about that today because I find it totally disgusting. And I'm going to let you all know that this stupid piece of shit lives in Kerrville, Texas. When he walked out of that courtroom a free man, he went to some, I think it was called, let me get the name of this place. Okay, it's Kerrville House, where he went directly to Kerrville. Okay, hang on. I know it's in here somewhere. Let's see. No, he went to this transitional facility. It was like this little transitional facility because his supervision was handled through standard parole channels. He was placed under Texas parole supervision, but it was Kerrville because we know he lives in Kerrville now. Yeah, yeah. So good to see everybody. Thank you for coming in. You know, I know this is kind of short, but really, what more can we say other than he fooled an Innocence Project. He fooled a group of people. He took advantage of a woman and her children. He took the lives of innocent children. How many more sociopaths are out there just like him? That's I'm going to end with that question right there. How many more? Okay, let's get ready to come back in tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. We're going to start back with day 5 of the Clancy trial. Here's what we decided. After we hear the doctors discuss Lindsay Clancy, we're going to do a panel with the Ward Case Studies, Jim Liu, about what we think, is this a psychosis? Was it something else? What's really going on here? Was this drug induced? I mean, the one thing that kind of was weird for me this week was how the defense attorney kept kind of going over there and bring in this thing about her wrist and her neck that didn't even require sutures. Oh, the hypothermia is the reason why it wasn't bleeding, blah, 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 blah. No, I mean, it just wasn't that big of a cut, to be honest with you. I think that's what I think, right? Oh, thank you so much, Leslie. We did have a wonderful birthday with my son. I can't believe he's 19, Les. I just can't believe it, y'all. I mean, it's so hard to believe that child is 19 now. He's such a good kid, though. You know, he went to summer school. Of course, he made straight A's. And here's what he's going to go to medical school. But what he told us is he's thinking about doing is just going on to pharmacy school. Because if you go into pharmacy school, it's 6 years, start to finish. So it's your 4-year plus 2. And you walk out with an MD anyway in pharmacy. But because he wants to be an anesthesiologist. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. Yeah. Anyway, just a little bit about him. But we'll just plan on coming back in at 8 o'clock in the morning. But yeah, I'm just kind of like, I don't understand. Another thing, y'all think about this though. When the 911 call was made, we learned this. The 911 call was made. He did not mention one thing about his children. Nobody knew those children were down there with the damn exercise bands around their neck until the ambulance got there and they started working on Lindsay. He went down into the basement after that and was screaming that guttural scream, because he found his children were dead. That is when they figured out there were children there. They were not prepared for that. They didn't have enough ambulances. They didn't have enough staff to take care of that. I thought that was kind of weird. Y'all think about that for a little bit. Anyway, with that, I'm going to say, take care of yourself. See you later. I'll probably be in somebody's chat tonight. I don't know. Hope to see y'all there. And you have a good, oh, good. Hey, listen, yeah. And Sprinkle Donuts off tomorrow so she can join us for our Lizzie Clancy trial. That's exciting. Yeah. My new son and his wife. Oh my gosh, Coupon's gonna have another grandchild. Oh, I'm so excited for you. Oh, I'm so jealous I have none. I want one, but my older child is not married yet, and my other child's too young. So maybe sometime I'm just excited to hear that. Thank you. I'm so glad. You'll have to let us know if it's a boy or girl. I love babies. And, think about what happened with these babies. And oh my God, I know none of the people we know would ever do something like this, but good God Almighty. Good God. Anyway, I'm going to let y'all go. I could spend 20 minutes over here talking to y'all some more. You know that. Anyway, take us on out. Yeah.
And don't forget to hug your babies. Hug your
You know what?
babies.
That's right. This life's short. Our time with them's even shorter. And the one thing you don't want to say is, I wished I would have. That is the thing I always tell people. Go out there, talk to them every day. Go tell them right now you love them. I always say that. Thank you so much. They did a gender reveal? Uh-oh. What's it going to be, Couponing? Are they going to do one or have not done it one? Let's see. She goes, yeah. Well, you got to let us know. You got to let us know what it's going to be. I'm excited for you. I'm going to say it's a little girl. Couponing, I think it's a little girl. What do you think, Sprinkle? Think it's a
I
boy?
don't know. It could be You're the Boys.
It could be the year of the voice. I think it's going to be a little girl. Anyway, we'll see y'all later. I'll see you tomorrow morning. Go have a good night. Go have some dinner. Bye, guys. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, hit that like button. And what I forgot to say it. Like, share, and subscribe. All right, now I'm going to say bye. Bye.